Alright guys, so this will be lesson 1, which is going to be the back to basics, so the very beginner stuff for Blender that I think everyone should know how to do no matter what you're doing in the program. I expect there's quite a few of you that think you already know a lot of this, or that you don't need to learn this, but promise you that I'm going to get onto slightly more advanced topics, and if you don't know any of these, it's going to be really difficult for you to follow along. So please just put up with some of the simple stuff for a bit, then we'll move on to some more interesting stuff later. So before I begin, I'm going to point out down the bottom left down here. You'll notice I have screencast keys, which will show you what buttons I'm pressing. It'll also tell you what I highlight, like that. So that can be useful for you just so you know what I'm pressing. The first thing we're going to cover is basic camera movement. So first of all, I'm going to go to the keyboard rather than the mouse. I'm going to press numpad 1, which will put the screen just looking at the front. If you press 3, you'll look from that side, and you can use shift 1 to look from the back, and control 1 to look from the back, and control 3 to look from the other side. So you can change all your angles like that. You can also press 7 to look from above, and control 7 to look from below. The next one I'm going to do is middle mouse button. So you've probably seen me doing it a couple of times already since we started, but if you just hold down middle mouse button, you can pivot and turn around like a turntable. It takes some getting used to, but you can use that very easily. Then there's obviously the second part of the middle mouse button, which is scrolling. So you scroll in, scroll out, very simple. Something that you'll probably have happen to you at some point using this is you'll be in the position where you're trying to work on this bit here, and then you'll rotate around and everything's gone and your screen's over there. So the easiest way to fix this is you hold Shift C and it'll center. So remember C for center, and it'll center your screen around where your objects are. From there, if you wish to more precise and you've got your screen over here, you can press the numpad period, which will center specifically on the item you have selected, which can be incredibly useful if you're working with multiple parts, all of which you're editing individually. Very useful tool. You can see that. Brilliant. So now we've got some basic camera movement. The next sort of thing we're going to go to is how to pan. So you've got the spinning around, but if you hold Shift and middle mouse button down and then move it around, you go left and right or up and down. You can hold Control and middle mouse button to zoom in and out, but that's the same as scrolling. So I would recommend scrolling as it's a little bit easier, to be honest. But with the combination of those, you can move your screen around and have full control of where you're looking. Brilliant. Now we've got everything the way we want it. Next up, if you are using Blender 2.8, which I will hope so, as if you haven't noticed already, I am, and if you're not on 2.8, you might struggle to follow a lot of this. You can hold the tilde key down, which is the one to the left of 1, so one that does that, but you can hold tilde. Then you've got top, back, right, view selected, bottom, left, front, and such. So they're all very useful as well. You'll also notice they have numbers next to them. Those numbers correspond to your normal numbers, so it'll be 1, which will be the camera, and so on. But quite a few different angles you can go, but I don't personally use those, but that's another way of navigating if you do so wish. So next up, you personally, I don't know if you usually open up normal, just a blank Blender thing. If you do, you should have this. So the default Blender will always have a default cube, a singular point light, and a camera. if you're opening, if what your normal way of starting a blend file is that you open a different file, we can show you how to avoid doing that. Because whenever you do that, all you're doing is, especially considering a lot of you are opening rigs, a lot of your rigs come from Blender 2.79 or are older for some of them, because some of them are very old. You'll notice that you'll have a slightly different layout at the top here. The reason for that is because the 2.79 is not optimized very well. You'll actually notice you'll get crashing more often if you're opening older files, and sometimes Eevee will crash when you try to render. There's always around that, and we'll go into those later on. But what we're going to do is I'm going to select all of these items. I'm actually going to do it one by one first. But what we'll do first is we'll select the camera with right click. I use right click select. You might have left click select on. If you do, that's not an issue. You just left click whenever I right click. So you can left click on those to select them instead. But I'm going to right click and I'm going to press X on my keyboard. X, and then it'll come up with this little option for delete and delete. Another one I could have done is I've selected this light now. I can go select, and I can go object, sorry, and delete will be in here somewhere. Delete. As you can tell, I don't use those options much. I have mostly got the commands. And then this one, and then X and delete. However, say I had all of these up again. All I've done for that is Control Z to undo, by the way. If I wanted to delete all of them, I can press A, and then I can just, once all of them are selected, which you can tell with these outlines, and then I can press X to delete all that. Additionally, say I wanted to delete just the light and the cube, but not the camera, I could select the camera, hold shift down, select the cube, and then X to delete. But for now I'm going to delete everything. Next up, you'll notice that my cursor is not on the center point. So the center point is there, but my cursor was up here. The importance of the cursor is that, say I wanted to add a new object in, which I'll show you how to do properly in a minute, it means that the center point isn't on the center of the mesh. So if I were to import one of my characters from one of my other projects, then I would have the other character spawn in the center, because that's where I make my characters, and then it means everything else I was spawning would have a different origin point, which is not really ideal. So if I delete that one, so I'm going to put my cursor back into the center with a command that we've already learnt, which is Shift C. Just put your cursor back in the middle. Perfect. So next up, we're going to go on to bringing in items. Not Roblox stuff yet, just normal adding an object. This is what you'll use if you want to create a scene, or if you just want to maybe create your own light rooms or anything along those lines. So you do that with Shift and then A, which will get at the add screen, and there's a number of different things you can make in here, but for now we're just going to go Mesh, and we'll bring in the monkey. This is Suzanne. And instantly you have your monkey. Now, say we've got it here, but we don't really want it there, and we want to sort of push it back. So there's a couple of ways to do that. I could hold right click on it and then pull it out, or then Control Z to move that back. I can press G and move it about. There is an advantage to using G rather than right click, is that if I were to use G and move it down here, if I were to just use right click and then drop it down here, and then I don't like it, I have to actually undo it. Where if I use G and I move it down here, before I even let go, if I'm not happy with moving it, I can right click it and it will return to its spot. But say I wanted to move it just to one direction. So I want to put it on that red line around about there, and I've missed that. See, that's not ideal. So the way you can do that is if I press G and I've got it over here, it's quite hard to tell if it's actually in the right spot. So what I'm going to do is, while it's still held with G, I'm going to press X, and now it is locked to the x-axis. So it can only move left and right. And now if I place it, it'll be perfectly on that line. But it works with more than just that, so I can press G, pick up and move freely, and without putting it down I can press Y to move it on the y-axis. I could even press Z to move it on the z-axis. There's another thing that you can do is, say I had to press G, and then I would move it up to there because I want to put it around about over there, at that spot over there, and then I realise that it's actually come off the floor. So I can press G, but then I can press Shift Z, so it'll do on everything but not the z-axis, and then I can move it up there, and then it stays without moving up and down. Brilliant. So we've got sort of moving it around. The only extra thing I will add is the control button. So if I'm moving things around and I hold control, I can lock it to the grid. That can be incredibly useful when you're doing slightly more precise movements, especially if you're trying to just keep everything in line. If you move everything up and keeping it to a grid, very useful. But moving on from moving it, what about scaling it? So I want to make it bigger. How about that? That's the easiest thing to do ever. You select it, so if you're like this, obviously now it won't do anything. I have to select it, which for me is right click. Again, could be left click for you. And then you press S, and we can scale it up. Even so big that we're cameras inside of it. Or I could even scale it down to be really small. See, that's so small it'd be awkward to work with, but very easily done. And then the next one is, say for example, like the Roblox rigs, you press 1 to look at it from the front, and you notice that your Roblox rig is facing the wrong way, which actually is the case for Paint Rig V3. If any of you use it, that rig is facing the wrong way, and that will cause you issues, and some of you have probably already seen it. I know a lot of you have complained about that rig being awkward to bend. It's not awkward to bend, it's very easy to bend. It's just that it's the wrong way, and you're attempting to make it bend beyond constraints because you're attempting to snap his elbows backwards. So how would you fix this? You might already have an idea because you saw me flip it round to make the issue. But all you could do is you could press 7 to look at it from above and then just rotate it round. Because it rotates on the axis you're looking at unless you specify otherwise. I could rotate it and then lock it to the z-axis of rotation and spin it around. I could press rotate and then just type in 180. But that issue with that is it's done at 180 on all axes. So R, Z, 180 would be better. Brilliant. And pretty much got your own thing now. You can rotate it however you like. I might even want it to face to the right or even slightly diagonally. I don't know, depends what you're trying to do, I suppose, for that. But very easily done. And I think that pretty much sums up moving objects. You can, we'll dump that there for the rest of this episode, I think. Actually, no, we won't, because next up is edit mode. So we've got this mesh here. I'm not going to go into extreme detail of edit mode because it can be quite an awkward topic and there's a lot to it. But we're going to go into some complete, very simple things. So to edit and enter and exit edit mode, all you have to do is select an item and press the tab key. Alternatively, if you select an item, up in the top left, it says object mode and edit mode. Easily done. Now, say there was something on this mesh we didn't like. For example, that little love heart shaped nose bit that he's got here. Say we didn't like that. We might want to change it. So you'll notice in this thing, you might have something that looks more like this, or like this. So whichever one you have, up in the top left, up here, if you can see where my mouse is, these are your different controllers. So the far left one is vertices. Vertices are these points. And then you've got edges, which are, again, obviously edges. And then you've got faces, which are entire faces. So we're going to, for a second, use vertices. The advantage to using vertices is that all vertices are obviously connected by lines, which means that, say we wanted to, I don't know, let's this part of his eye, and we wanted to slightly sharpen it up. I could press G, just pull it over, and he's got a slightly sharper side on this part of the eye. Don't want that, but it's very easy to do. You could even, if I wanted to, pull up this, even slightly more Alfie-like ears. I know that's horrible looking, but you get the idea. The reason I showed you object mode movement first is because with object mode movement works exactly the same. So, say I wanted to, I'm trying to think, maybe grab hold of this part of him and bring it out and make his ears a little bit weird. Eyes a little bit weird, sorry. It's a little bit creepy, but we can do that. Make him look like he's got kind of goggly style stuff on. I don't know why you'd want to do that. It's a bit mean, but you can. The way to do it is when you've got face select on, so you want to select a chain of faces. If the mesh has good topology, this is, we'll go into topology at a later date. If you hold Alt down and right click, it will select that whole loop. So a loop is created by, if you look at a face like this, loops always go across. So in order to create a strong edge loop, it has to be a quad mesh. So a quad mesh just means a series of 4 points that make a square. Doesn't have to be a perfect square, but roughly a square. And it'll go from one side, one side to the other like that, and it'll go across. This isn't actually essential yet, I just thought I'd explain it, and that's how you select loops. This loop probably goes all the way around the head. Yes, it does. And I have this one which will go all the way around the front of his face, but basics there. And if all you have to do to move stuff, doesn't matter which one you're on, is select a point or a face, and then press G. So same controls as the other one to move it, and then you can move it like that. And it really is that simple. I know I've gone a little bit quickly, and I've mentioned quite a few different controls and a few different buttons that you can press. I'm hoping that because I've done it in the video, anything that you're stuck on, you can go back and watch. And I'm hoping my voice is clear enough for you to be able to understand what I'm saying, and the screencast keys hopefully can help. In the next one, what we're going to do is we're going to go over materials, adding materials to different meshes, and having multiple materials on one mesh, and how to cycle between them and edit them and change them. We'll also go into importing meshes in order to assign materials to, in which I will use a Roblox character, in which, in fact, anyone that wants to give me a Roblox character that you have, that you would like me to use for the tutorial, feel free to message me, DM me, or send it to me in some manner through the server. So, however you like, good luck, and I hope I have been helpful.